So welcome everyone to CXMP. This is February 2024. Focus today is creating the business case for client experience. I know a lot of individuals inside some really good firms have this passion or this vision for doing more than what they're being allocated time, budget, resources to do. And I think a lot of that is because uh, uh, we're not really clearly articulating a strong business case for change. We're not creating that business case to get the kind of resources and attention that CX really should deserve. So this is a great workshop for the CX evangelists who want to do more, who want to go faster, who want to go further. We're really going to talk today about how do we frame that and then how do we execute a business case inside the organization. Sounds like everyone has a marketing BD background, so a lot of this is probably going to feel, oh, I've heard pieces of this before. What we're trying to do is assemble it in a relevant way to directly address client experience. Some other things to use this for, perhaps you've got all the budget and resources you want and need to transform an organization with CX, and you're running into adoption and uptake issues with certain elements of the organization, be it the front line, a corporate support, something like that. Maybe the C-suite is on board and they're giving you the resources, but you're struggling to get the people who actually have to do the work and do the change to get on board. So a lot of this is also a good change management framework for communicating the what's in it for me for each of the key stakeholders inside the organization, be it someone on the front line, management, leadership, corporate support, or anywhere in between. So that's the framework for today. So with that, you guys are here, one, because you need to go to 6 of these things, but two, you of the many you could have picked, you've chosen this one. I'd just love to hear from you what you're hoping to get out of today. And maybe, where do you sit right now on the um ability to get investment and attention in CX? So let's go in reverse order. I'm going to skip the client savvy guys because you guys are here on the internal team. But Joe, what's your
Yeah,
thought?
so you had sent kind of a precursor outline that caught my attention in, the investigative bloodhound aspect of this and kind of determining, helping to decipher leadership's pain points and address those tactily in a way that I can and my small facet of all the things that we're doing at the firm. We are always and ever probably forever going to be trying to figure out ways to make CX more than a nice to have and make us a need to have, right? Isn't that's the mountain to climb as a
Yep.
CX professional. So any way that I can do that and convert that into numbers and data, I'm always looking for angles for that. So yeah.
Good. Then Ava, I think you were middle last time, so
Yeah.
you're middle again.
Yes. So at my firm, we have a lot of elements of CX. I mean, what we do is, we don't sell products, we sell our services. We're a full service, corporate law firm. And so as part of what I specifically do is we take these programs, push them out to clients or push them to our internal clients, and they all work well. Or have worked well. It's really about, but they're siloed. So what I would like to get out, as you said, earlier, is to how to like transform the programs that we have to kind of make them all go together with the entire journey and within other departments. BD does the job of client experience, I would say, but really everybody does, but a partner will tell you that his practice is here. And then if we go over to conflicts, they'll say, well, this is how we service the client. So coming up with something that is, even if it's not, we want to put it all together right this second, maybe just having a few elements to at least start to bring this together. We do have a program called Exceptional Client Service, and it's like how we service our clients. It's like our Bible. So maybe taking what we have and then also trying to get the other programs and departments rather on board for more of the full circle.
Yeah, excellent. Amanda?
Yeah, I'll chime in next. Well, we have a lot of support from our CEO and in our firm altogether. I just think for us, it's just me and Jen Caro, who is the director of client experience. And for us, it's all about kind of growing our program and engaging everyone throughout the firm. So we have she's implemented a ton of great practices already, from new hire onboarding to client onboarding to our client service standards. We've created a Credo card. So I kind of just want to listen in and learn about some new best practices and ways to really engage everyone in our firm and get everyone on board for the client experience.
Right. Well, yeah, is this your first session with us, Amanda?
Yes, it
Well,
is.
then you are literally starting at the very beginning here today. So this is a great place to begin. Well, thank you guys for sharing that. I do think this is going to align well. Uh, as usual, we do have a mural exercise. We'll spend the last portion of our day in collaborating. I do have a slide deck I want to walk through just for some of the framing and staging of this. And we'll probably take a 10-15 minute break somewhere in between. Just, I know 3 hours can be a lot to slog through, especially virtually. So that should round us out for agenda today. And again, no matter where we are, this is meant to be conversational. There's 6 of us here, so we certainly don't have to make this a one-way a didactic presentation from me to you. Let's really keep this conversational as we go through. So the framework I'm going to lay out today is this hypothesis that you can solve virtually any business problem with client experience. And I want to frame it that way because if you go to a leader somewhere in the organization and say, hey, tell me what your client experience problems are, their range of thinking is going to be really, really narrow. Whereas if it can really understand, hey, what's keeping you up at night, open-ended, and then we as a CX professional start learning and figuring out how do we apply the tools of CX just to bring relief everywhere in the organization that there's pain, CX starts to win more often, gains more followers, and that's this kind of organic way to work CX through the organization. And apparently I'm all the way on the very last slide. I'm not sure why. So solving any problem with client experience, I'm going to say, leaders struggle with problems. Some problems just look really big and daunting. I love to surf. I spend as much time in the water as I can. When I go to the beach, my wife's got a book in the nose all day and I'm on a board out in the water. But there's waves that are just too big. I don't even want to tackle them, right? It's scary. It's threatening. Some problems don't even look like problems. This is the perfect wave for me. But sometimes there's something lurking under the water that you're just not aware of. And again, things can go sideways. Sometimes problems come at you from both directions. And I love this one. I mean, who expects a wave to rebound like that, right? And just wipe everybody out. Sometimes problems are just like confusing. Like, how in the world does that even happen? Have you guys ever seen square waves like that before? How does that even happen? But every now and then when we're thinking about problems and we're trying to understand what do we do with this, we just like we figure it out, we solve it, everything goes great, and you kind of look back at the end, it's like, man, what a great problem that was. I mean, look how we solved it. Look how much of an impact we made. So the process we're going to walk through today is going to take some of those complex, big, scary, uncertain, lurking under the water type business problems and give us a framework to diagnose them to where we end up with this kind of outcome more often. And then we're using the tools of client experience really to address that. Now, I will say this is a problem-solving methodology that we've adapted specifically to client experience. But you can use the same methodology for really any kind of solution set that you want to throw at the problem. So those of you that are in hybrid roles, I do marketing and I do CX. I do business development and I do CX. I do quality and operations and I do CX. This framework is going to be a transferable framework beyond that. So, feel free to jump in and share a story here. I'm going to ask you to just nod your head, but I'd love to hear a couple of stories. Who here has seen a really smart leader in the business identify a problem and the solutions just feel like they're throwing darts at the board? All right, don't talk about me, Sheldon. Does someone have a story that a story they want to share about, boy, the problem just seems so obvious and we just couldn't find a way to fix it? Sometimes that's a tough spot with a small audience, is not having someone who's got the story that comes to mind. That's right. I don't think I need to define client experience with this group. I think you guys get that. But I was talking with a CEO of a nationally, in fact, internationally renowned architecture firm, and asking him, what the business of architecture was, and he goes, "Oh, it's really easy. All you got to do is the work." And he said, "Of course, that means you got to win the work. You got to find the work, win the work, and do the work." And as I was thinking through that and really kind of extending that idea in the weeks, months, and years that followed, I'm like, you know what? That's really a beautiful way to frame how business problems can be categorized inside the organization. In professional services, it doesn't matter whether you're an architect, an accountant, a lawyer. All you got to do is the work. But you do have to find the work, and there's problems with finding the work. You've got to win the work. There's problems with winning the work. You've got to staff the work, and there's problems with staffing the work. You got to do the work, and there's problems with delivery. You got to get paid for the work. There's problems in billing, finance, and business. And really, you got to keep the work. You got to retain the clients and keep the work coming back. So if you're thinking about, I really want to, move CX through the organization, I really want to elevate this, I want to get more attention, I want to get more resources, start sniffing around that ecosystem of find, win, staff, do, pay, and keep the work. Because there's going to be problems in every one of those. There's going to be challenges in each one of those. And I'm using perhaps some negative language talking about problems. A lot of leaders are reluctant to admit that they have pains or they have problems in the business. Have you guys run into that? The undying optimist. So when you run into that, a tool I found that's really useful is, hey, what does the ideal future state look like? Where do we want to be in 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, 3 years? And as they describe that ideal future state, you can ask, well, what boulders are in the way? What's keeping us from getting there? As they start talking about the boulders in the road, guess what you've just done? You've identified problems. So good technique. If if someone's quick to talk about what their pain points are, great that they make life easy. If they're not, let's talk about the ideal future state and then what impediments exist between today and that future. And those impediments probably are going to fit into one of these categories. So I'm going to give you just a quick taxonomy of these problems as we start walking through. The slide deck is in the mural, so you don't have to take a ton of notes here. Of course, feel free to, but this slide deck is in the mural. We've got a great ebook on this we can share with you if you want this catalog of 24 problems. We can certainly share that with you. But finding the work, how do we look different than everybody else? You go into any Chick-fil-A or any Starbucks anywhere in the world, you're going to have a very consistent experience. You work with 3 different accountants. Are you going to have one experience, or you're going to have 3 very different experiences? So there's inconsistent brand flag, market penetration, lack of referrals, competitors encroaching. So these are all some of the pains you'll find leaders talking about. It's hard to grow into a new market. Our competitors are eating our lunch. We're not getting the referrals that we're getting or that we need. Anyone see something on this list that you're like, oh man, that's the one I'm working on right now? David, do you see anything?
I have
What?
clients that are facing all of these, but recently I had a client that is having their lunch eaten by their competitors, and they're trying to figure out really a way, kind of all of these tied together, like how do we differentiate and how do we take advantage of, client feedback to get referrals, so that we can start winning more business and have a bigger share of wallet.
Great. Joe, how about you? Is there anything on this list that really looks relevant inside opinion?
I would not lately. Inconsistent branding was something that we kind of pretty well sealed up last year after doing a branding and entity change and going to that Opinion Global branding. But I am, one of the, I don't know how many of you guys have dedicated CX people or run into companies that do, but I'm fortunate to be kind of CX focused as kind of an annex from marketing. So we have a dedicated marketing team, and I spend 100% of my day CX focused. So our marketing team, this is their problem on a day-to-day basis, at least this portion, defined aspect.
Got it. So as we jump into winning work, low win rate for finding the work, but we're winning 22%. We should be winning 44%. Or we could win more, but our A teams are all stretched thin. And so I don't have enough A players to be able to go win and secure some of these new opportunities we're pursuing. A succession planning, we had the steady stream of work coming in from this client for the last 22 years, and now Bob retired and the work's not coming in the same way it was anymore. Whether Bob was internal or Bob was external, that relationship has moved on. Pricing alignment with the talent war. I know there's substantial upward pressure on salaries, which has, big impacts on multipliers, hourly rates, things like that. So there's this tension of fear of raising our prices, but if we don't, we can't pay for the talent. So there's all this tension there. And then Ryan, you mentioned share of wallet. This is one I think a lot of CX people are in tune with, and a lot of your leaders are not. If you ask your leaders about loyalty, they'll say, oh yeah, 85% of our work was repeat business. I'm like, it doesn't tell you anything. Share of wallet is a much more telling number of loyalty than what percentage of work is a repeat business. On average, our clients give us 22% of the work they could be giving us. Oh, well, that's a very different metric, right? That means they're spreading their work around to, 4.7 firms, and we're only getting, a piece of it. Amanda, do you see something on this list that resonates at Markham?
Yeah, I think definitely low win rates and pricing alignment. Like you said, for low win rates, when you're finding the work but not really winning it, I think it's a problem. Like, how do we differentiate in the marketplace? And that comes down to getting the clients and how we treat our current clients. So I think low win rates for sure, and then pricing alignment also definitely, which kind of goes back to your first question about what are your problems. And I think when our employees aren't upfront about pricing and price increase, that's when problems arise. And it's all about, how do we solve that? How do we be transparent and clear with the clients from the start? So
Yeah.
definitely low win rates and pricing alignment as well.
Yep. Our tax accountant at Client Savvy gave us about a 30% price increase this January for our tax work for the new year. And we're moving on to someone else. If they had doubled the price, but doubled the amount of time they were spending with us, or even increased it, 30%, they're treating us
Yep.
like a transaction. They're not treating us like they care about us. And so, okay, if we're a transactional client, you're going to be price sensitive. If you're going to treat me like a partner, I'm not going to complain about the price increase because the value perception is there. So yeah, absolutely. It's a very real one right now. Does anyone know a good tax accountant? Kidding. Oh, kidding. So yeah, as you see things on this list as we're going through, write the ones that jump out to you, because we're going to come back and those could become a fodder for the exercise later on. We're talking about staffing work, underperforming sub-consultants, the war for talent, new hire integration. If you hire someone new, you've got to teach them the Markham way or the Pinion way. Optimizing staff assignments. Do you have the people best affiliated with this client working on the work to create the best possible outcome for the clients, while also being satisfying to the soul of the staff that you're assigning the work to? Because these are smart, intelligent professionals who want to do challenging and engaging work. You think about doing the work. Are we cross-selling effectively? We're in there doing service A, but our ears are there. Are we using them to hear that they have needs for services B, C, D, and E? And are we cross-selling? Does the client ask for something out of scope and we don't have a process or approach for handling change orders, and so it becomes disruptive or negatively impacts sentiment? Do you have difficult clients that are just a pain in the rear? Understanding why and where that comes from. A lot of times that's because of a broken CX. Too much firefighting. When something goes sideways with the client, who tends to jump in to put the fire out? Is it usually one of your rainmakers? So if the rainmaker's spending 20% of the time fighting fires, what are they not spending their time doing? So there's some real cost to revenue there. And then delivering quality, rework, liability, risk. There's all kinds of things that happen in the quality side. So Ava, do you see anything in this list that's jumping out to you?
Yeah, I would lack cross-selling. We talk all the time about cross-selling our services. We try to look at our clients from the perspective of like, okay, so what industries, what matters are we working on? And then where can we offer our, other services? But also I think with geography, we tend to stay either just in the US or just in our office in Florida, or just, you know what I mean? Like just with the people down the hall we work with. So I think bringing that awareness, is something that we can all be better with internally, like internal clients and also our external clients. So.
Right. And then, getting paid for the work, and you think about some of the back office elements that are problems, slow paying clients, write-offs and markdowns, Low utilization can be a problem because that hurts your margin. Too much utilization can be a problem because that hurts your business development. People don't sell when they're too busy doing, especially when you have a strong seller doer culture. New client churn, the research we've done, first time clients are 40% more likely to never come back than a client who's done 2 or more projects with you. Value justification to get paid for the work or to enable someone to sign off on the invoice that you sent. Anyone seeing any of these issues?
Yeah, we've implemented ELT and officer and board reporting from our end, from our mighty team of 2, covering regrettable churn factors within the firm, things that are on our end, removing, anything that we don't have any control over, and really honing in on specific factors, creating churn with a reporting process by our sales teams and business development teams. When a client leaves us, we are holding people accountable to a degree, and then using that data and month-over-month reporting to leadership to look for red flags by region, by company-wide, so on and so forth, so that they can start to see problems before they become big problems. And regrettable churn factors for us are like, service or timeliness related issues as being the underlying, or turnover of our staff. If we have somebody leave somebody's been doing work with for 10 years, and that's then that's on our end. That's something that we need to own, and so on. Value justification kind of ties in with part of the previous. We just hired a hotshot pricing strategist from outside the firm, brought her on board to come in and rework value justification and value mapping and pricing, because of all the issues that we face in professional services. Do more with less, and we're getting to a point, I think, where if you gain a client, you're taking a client from somebody else.
Yeah.
There isn't a lot of, it's a 10% margin of fresh. We're their first firm. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. A smart leader I work with once said there's no such thing as a new client. There's just someone else's client. And so all the growth we're doing, all of our competitors are doing the same thing. So our clients are always at risk because the only growth is going to come from existing clients. That's not entirely true. There are occasionally, like you said, 10% of the time, there's a brand new client that it's their first time buying, but most clients that we win are clients that are coming from somebody else. We've stolen them from someone. So yeah, hopefully going through this, you guys have seen a couple of pain points that either you're already working on or you've heard leaders talking about. It's great to have a catalog of known pain points, because when you go to a leader and you're just having a conversation, even if you're not probing specifically around pain, having a catalog of pain points. When you hear the leader giving a company-wide update, be listening with that ear. Am I hearing any of these pain points? If they do a quarterly newsletter or a monthly memo, if you happen to be sitting in the room and there's one or more leaders and they're talking, listening for these things with very careful ears, lets you kind of, okay, let's make a note. These are things leaders are talking about. There's your clues. There's some opportunity to lean in as a CX professional and say, hey, can we tackle this in some way, shape, or form? And I'm going to show you how to do that in just a minute, but it's hard to tackle the problems if we don't know how to identify the problems. So that's why I wanted to go through this taxonomy. There's plenty more problems that you can solve with CX. Mergers, acquisitions, those are on the list here. If you're a firm buying firms, there's a whole CX slew of things you can do there. So this list is not exhaustive, But again, I just wanted you to be sensitive and listening as we go forward. So we start thinking about, marketer-led solutioning, or we start thinking about CX and CX-led solutioning. I was just saying, listen for what hurts. One of the things marketing does better than anyone else, and hopefully CX professionals do better than anyone else, is listen. So we're always listening for pain points in the organization. And as you hear those, probe to learn more. Hey, CEO, I heard you say this. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? What does that look like in your world? Just ask some questions to start wrapping your hands around what does this problem really look like. And it's amazing the power of when they say we're having a problem with regrettable churn, just I'll pick on Joe's example here. Okay, what do you mean by regrettable churn? And as you start engaging in the conversation, they'll say it again, but they'll say it a different way. And you start getting different shades of the problem. So I like to repeat it back to them a couple of times. And it might sound a bit repetitive, but it's amazing the potency of saying it back, getting them to confirm, say it again, to really get clarity. Because oftentimes what they tell you the problem isn't really what they think the problem is. It's just the words that came out of their mouth. So a big part of what we're doing is we're really consulting, and we're helping someone better understand the problem, or we're helping them think through it. And by the time they say the problem a third time, they've usually found the most accurate words to describe what's going on. So it's just a really great technique as you roll through that. Now, oftentimes what you're going to hear is, especially, hey, I heard you talk about regrettable churn. Tell me more about that. What does that mean? What does it look like? 2 or 3 other problems might come out in the conversation. And this is where I'm going to challenge you. The first big step of discipline in the process is to focus on one problem at a time. It's one of the biggest mistakes I see change makers make is they try to tackle too much at once. And it's kind of like that square wave image I showed. You got waves coming from multiple directions. How do you read what action to take? Which wave do you ride? It's really tough when you've got 2 or more problems that you're trying to diagnose at the same time. So use some discipline here. If you've heard 3 problems, all right, Amanda, what I heard you say is you're struggling with this, you see a problem over here, and you see a missed opportunity over here. So there's 3 things going on. You get the confirmation. Great. If you could tackle one of these, which one would you want to tackle first? And so get agreement on prioritizing one to tackle on. It doesn't mean an hour later we can't come back and work through problem 2, work through problem 3. But let's at least pick one and let's stay laser focused on it. And by agreeing to do that and getting their agreement early in the conversation to stay focused on solving one, if they go down a rabbit trail, does anyone have leaders that go down rabbit trails like all the time? Hey, Ryan, come on. If someone starts going down a rabbit trail, you can always rein them back and, hey, we agreed we're going to focus on this one. Sounds like there's some work over here we can go explore. I'll make a note of it. Can we come back to that, but stay focused on this one for right now? And it's a tool you can use to get the conversation back on track. And then from there, we're going to take that problem and we're going to go into the diagnostic tool. So this is what we're going to do in the last half of the workshop today, is really go through the problem diagnostic model. And before I get there, let me ask, Tim and Sheldon, I know you've seen this specific model before, so you guys don't have to answer, but you can certainly answer from a past life if you want to. Have any of you been formally trained or adopted a formal problem-solving methodology before?
I kind of developed a problem solving like pathway matrix at Zillow in handling clients on a day-to-day basis for addressing things, but it wasn't conversational. It was presented with a problem and quick resolution within the org. I
Okay.
don't know if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, it sounds like you at least were thoughtful and intentional in identifying a problem and trying to develop a solution around it. Most people I've worked with or coached on this, most leaders I work with, they'll sit around a boardroom, they'll talk about a problem, they might even define it somewhat clearly, but usually it's fairly nebulous. And then once a problem's on the table, what does everyone in the room want to start doing?
Sharing solutions.
They want to jump from, I think I know what the problem is, even though there's 6 people in the room and they have 6 different understandings of what the problem is. And then they start all brainstorming. And we've just missed so much. So, and the problem I think is even more endemic in professional services because leaders in professional services, they tend to be very highly technical professionals. And their whole career has been what? Solving problems. That's what professional services is. So every one of the leaders in our businesses wears as a badge of pride, I'm a professional problem solver. I've got the licensure from the state, I'm board certified, I'm whatever, whatever, whatever. I'm a problem solver. So they fancy themselves as really effective problem solvers. And they're usually very good at solving a tax problem or a legal matter or an engineering challenge. I mean, that's what they went to school for. And so I think there's this false sense of competence at solving business problems. And I don't have any of those leaders here in the room, so I'm not throwing them under the bus. But this is the reality. This is the context. And so when you have that false sense of competence to identifying and solving business problems, if you don't have a framework, oftentimes the conversation and the solutioning turns into who has the highest rank, who owns the most shares, who's got the most tenure. And so some of the very best ideas never even make it into consideration because there's a power dynamic at play that prevents the best solution from really coming to the top. So a formal solutioning methodology that we're going to share and go through today can overcome a lot of those boundaries of ego, role, title, tenure, shareholder vote, and the framework can let the best ideas come to the top. So as we, before I move on, any questions about that framing so far? All right. So what we're going to go through here is what the practicum part of the workshop is going to be. It is literally doing these steps right here. We're going to come in having identified a problem, and we're going to practice going through how do we now solve for the problem. And the solutioning is that what brings us into where do we get the tools of CX as part of the solution statement. All right. So whoever we're working with, whether it's a room of leaders, whether it's working with a leader, we're going to agree to evaluate the problem together. Now, you might be working behind the scenes building a business case. You might be trying to put together, here's the business case for change, and you don't have access to all of the voices that need to be heard. So I'm presenting this as though you're talking with the relevant stakeholders inside the business to collect information. You can also do this with a lower degree of precision, but you can also do this just using empathy. What would the leader say? You know, how would the leader answer this question? Let me use my brain. Let me think through this. And you can apply this independently. So it's better if you're getting stakeholder engagement, but it doesn't have to be a fully this is something you can use just building the business case. And there's a few parts in here where you're going to see that come through. So if you are working with the leader or working with the group, let's agree to evaluate. Step 3, we identified the challenge that we're going to work on. Let's agree to evaluate it together. So we're going to clearly restate and articulate the problem. Let's make sure everyone who's involved in the conversation understands what the problem is. We have a common understanding of the problem. We need to then brainstorm root causes. We can't solve the problem if we don't know what's causing the problem. We're going to end up prescribing Tylenol for leg pain without first diagnosing you broke your leg. We probably need to do something different than just prescribing some medicine. Okay. So by going through the root cause analysis, now we can start thinking about solutions that tackle the root causes. If we don't tackle all the root causes of the problem is not likely to be solved. So this is, again, one of those control moments as you're guiding a group or guiding someone through the conversation. We've picked this problem. No, we're not going to solve it yet. All right, we're going to brainstorm root causes. No, we're not going to solve it yet. Because the solution is going to require people to do something different. So who are the stakeholders that are impacted by the problem? The people impacted by the problem are going to be your stakeholders who will be part of the solution. So this part is really starting to create the what's in it for me. This is what's starting to create the change management part of the solution before we even have the solution in place. If the solution, if the problem requires Jim to do something different, if we haven't identified Jim needs to do something different and we haven't identified his role in the solution, we might put together the completely wrong solution. And then Jim's going to look at it and say, there's no way in the world that's going to work. And whether he's right or not, we've lost Jim. And if Jim's a critical part, we're not going to solve the problem. And we're still not quite ready to solve yet because now we need to quantify the impact of the problem. And this is really getting into the business case side of it. And we will I'll show you some math shortcuts for quantifying impact, but this is a huge, huge piece of it because this is what ultimately gets the board or the executive leadership team to sign off on allocating resources, creating budget, hiring additional CX collaborators, bringing in new tools and technology, like whatever is needed to solve the problem. This is how you create the budget and the resourcing to solve the problem. If you've got a $10 million problem, Ava, how confident would you be if someone said they could solve it for $10?
Not confident at all.
Why? I mean, what a great ROI.
That is a great ROI. I guess the first thing is it just doesn't seem realistic based on the two different numbers. So also I think it would take a lot more money because it would take a lot more time. A huge, lengthy problem with that high of a monetary value to it, I think way underscoring that.
Yeah. Yeah. I was taking a principal at a firm through this process several years ago. She said, our biggest problem is that we just don't make good decisions. We don't have a good decision-making process. But you know what? I don't want to diagnose that one. I'm just going to write a memo and that'll tell everyone how to make decisions. Like, okay, maybe that's the solution, but you went from problem right into solution space. Would you humor me? And let's go through the diagnostic first. And we went through root causes and she was, oh, I didn't think about that. Didn't think about that. Didn't think about that. We talk about all the people who are impacted and how messy it makes their lives and professionally frustrating. We talked about the impact it has. And an hour later, it's like, this is a $350,000 problem. We're losing over $300,000 a year in profit because of this problem. It's like, well, Katie, what are you going to do about that? I don't think a memo is going to work. All of a sudden, she thought, yeah, I know I got this problem. It's kind of back in my mind. I'm just gonna, talk about it and maybe that'll solve it. By the time we got through the diagnostic, she realized that there was actually a pretty substantial lift that had to happen. And if you had started saying, hey, you're gonna have to throw $50,000 in change management to solve this decision-making problem, if we said that at the beginning of the conversation, we never would have made it to the second sentence. So quantifying the impact gives you the framework you need to right size the solution space. You could also have a $10,000 problem that requires a $50,000 solution. Who's going to invest in that? Nobody. It doesn't make sense. So the quantification piece lets you know, is this a problem we even really need to focus on? Is it feasible to solve the problem? So with that, a clear understanding of the problem, we know what's causing it. We know who the stakeholders are that are impacted. And if we're solving the problem, they're going to be supporters, not adversaries. We know how big the problem is, so we can right size the solution. Then we have all the tools we need to start brainstorming solutions. Now we can start getting into that solutioning space. Got a $10 million problem. I'm probably looking at $1 million to $5 million solution, right? If it was that easy that $10 could solve it, we would have solved it by now. But I also know I'm not looking at $20 million solutions, because that would be a really poor investment. So any questions about the solutioning model? All right, this is what we're actually going to do. This is the exercise. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that. There are some good techniques as we go through the solutioning model. So I love doing a real discovery approach because it's unobjectionable. One way to get buy-in is to make it someone else's idea. If you're trying to convince a leader, if you're trying to build a case, you tell them what to do. It's easy to say, no, that's not going to work. So guiding them forward, three great keys are questions. First one, always, all right, we've identified the problem. What's causing it? What else? What else could cause it? What else could cause it? What else could cause it? I know I taught this to Sheldon a year ago, and he was kind of like, oh man, that just sounds ridiculous. But Sheldon, how much do you use that approach now?
All the time. And I had to present this at a conference, and that was when I was like, there's no way this, like, but it does make sense, because kind of what you just were touching on with the $10 solution, like the first three ideas that somebody comes up with, like someone's already tried that. Like those are easy, low-hanging fruit that, like, that's not what's going to solve a $10 million problem. And you have to keep digging, and generally people will get to the answer if you keep doing it. Ryan does this ad nauseum in our meetings internally. I'm sure Tim's already gotten a taste of it, as, what else could it be? What else? What else? Like, so you got to be prepared to answer in our meetings like 6 different things, but it really does work.
The best ideas are going to be 6, 7, and 8 on the list. It really is. All the easy stuff is 1, 2, and 3. The innovation happens the deeper you go down. So as you're doing root cause analysis, and again, whether you're asking someone else or whether you're asking yourself because you're working on an island on a problem, write down 7 root causes. And it's going to get hard when you get down to 5, 6, and 7. But when you really push and you think at that depth, great ideas start to surface.
And I
Now,
also would add to that, Saddam, like if you are on that island, pull in some other people to get some other ideas to brainstorm. And, they're going to share thoughts that you wouldn't, like if you're in marketing, BD, bring someone in from operations, because they're not thinking the same way that you are, or vice versa. So I found that incredibly helpful.
great point, Ryan. Now, sometimes you already have an idea of the solution that you want to solve. You've already done the thinking. Sometimes you've done that island work. You've already got the solution in mind. You know what the problem is. You know what's causing it. You know the impacts and who's impacted. You know what it's costing the business. You've done your homework, but now you're in the selling it phase of trying to sell it to the board or sell it to a leader. So sometimes you're trying to guide someone to an answer. And if you're trying to guide someone to an answer, you could tell them the answer and they could say, no, that's not it. You risk being rejected or you risk the objection. So instead, if you're, hey, do you think it could be caused by this? If they say no, you move on. If they say yes, don't just check the box. Say, oh, tell me why. Tell me how. What does that look like in your world? And as they begin to articulate, they go, yeah, huh. All right, let me think about that. It could be caused by this because, and as their eyes roll up, they're looking, into the depths of their brain, they're starting to think about it, it becomes their idea. And so now they own it. So that's another potent tool. What could be causing this? What else? What else? What else? Could it be caused by? Yeah, tell me more. You can share a story. Hey, I was talking, to Timothy over at, XYZ. Here's what they saw. Do you think that applies in our situation? Instead of saying, the other end of the spectrum is Dr. Phil. Ava, what you need to do is, it just makes me cringe every time someone tells me what I need to do, right? So tell a story and say, does that story relate here? Yeah, that sounds a lot like us. Well, how is it the same? Tell me how our situation is different. And as they think through it, again, they've just taken that story. It could be a made up story. The point is, it's how we're delivering it. And then we get them to build on it. So now it becomes their idea. So that same pattern works for each one of these phases. What's causing it? What else? What else? What else? Could it be caused by? Yeah, tell me a bit more about that. What does that look like? Well, let's do the impacts. All right. So this problem that we talked about, Joe, what'd you call the churn?
Regrettable.
Regrettable churn.
Sorry,
Yep.
didn't want to unmute. Regrettable.
So, all right, regrettable churn. Who's impacted by that? Who else? Who else? Who else? And if they're leaving a key stakeholder off the list that is impacted, could it also be impacting this person or this role or this title? Yeah. How do you think it's impacting them? So now you're able to, if you need IT, you need finance, you need the front line, you need this to all be part of the solution. You need to make sure all of those names, titles, roles are on the solution set. These people are impacted by it. And that's how you're going to get permission. That's how you're going to get approval to pull resources from those parts of the business to be part of the solution. Ava, you seem to be thinking about that. Any questions?
No, I am thinking, but no questions at the
What are you
moment.
thinking?
Just, about the questions to ask. I feel like a lot of times, when we do go to clients and we say like, hey, what keeps you up at night? It's like word vomit, right? Like sometimes they're just like dying to let you know.
Yep.
I think it's what I'm thinking about is specifically how to guide it more. If, sift through those people who want to just tell you everything. So
Yeah.
that's all I was thinking in this moment.
Gotcha. So sometimes they're telling you too much and you're trying to stay on a train and they're scattering all over.
Yeah, what you mentioned earlier, just keeping the focus and, I guess going in there with some questions that prompt the answers that you're trying to get, or maybe the goal that you're trying to get to. But a lot of times when you ask leaders or clients or, somebody in a higher position, they're dying to say something that sometimes doesn't even stay on topic. So that's why I was thinking when you're like, well, what about this and this and this? I'm like, this could be really bad sometimes, but I get the point of what you said a little bit earlier about focusing it and guiding it more. So that's all I was thinking here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up. What do you
Mhm.
think could be causing that? I'm kidding.
Me, oh, I was gonna give you an answer.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's why having a formal problem-solving framework is a
Mhm.
really useful tool to have in your toolkit. And you'll see in the mural, I do have a worksheet for this that you can download and print out. I've got the framework kind of crafted in the mural environment. It's easy to draw on a whiteboard if you want to draw it on the whiteboard. So I'm very transparent when I go into a consulting session with either a prospect or a client, and we're trying to tackle something. I do this internally. I did it yesterday. Sheldon saw me do it yesterday in a all hands meeting. Tim was there too, but wasn't paying attention. I'm kidding. Um, yeah, if you draw the framework and you say, hey, here's what we're going to do, explain the framework before you do it. When they start to wander on the tangents, you can always bring them back to the framework. So having a, you know, bringing some smart people in the room to solve a problem, if there's not a framework, it's going to go everywhere. But if you have the framework, here's the agenda, here's what we're going to accomplish. We're going to start by defining the problem. We're going to do root cause analysis, a stakeholder impact, a financial or business impact. Then we'll get to solutioning. When they start going off, you can bring them back to what they agreed the agenda was. So I hope that helps.
And I can tell you from experience, even yesterday, and we're a CX company, and we've all been through this. Like, we immediately started jumping to solutions, and he's like, "That's a solution. That's great. Let's put that down." Or, "This is a different problem," and you still write it down, but then let's get back to here. And like, that's I've found it in my book of business as well. Like, that's one of the toughest parts of this, is just keeping everybody on track, because as soon as they think they found a solution, like, they're not, like, they're already moving on. How do we implement this? It's like, let's take a step back and remember that might not solve the problem. Might solve one piece of the problem.
Right. Good point, Ryan. Thank you. So now I said the first major place that people fail in the solutioning process is not clearly articulating the problem, one single problem to go solve. This is the second place I see people really struggle. And this probably really is the hardest part. That's creating the actual business case. So, the question is, what is this problem costing the business? Joe, what is regrettable churn costing Pinion? Do you have a number? You don't have to share it if you don't want to share it, but do you have a number?
Sure. Hang on, give me 1 second.
Wow, Joe's actually looking up a number. Okay.
I'll ballpark you.
It's good enough.
Well, I'll give you a percentage of what our year-to-date churn is regrettable. I won't give you hard numbers. I don't need that coming back on me, but we're at exactly 6.89%.
Wow. Does that sound painful to a leader's ears?
I don't know. I don't, I do these reports month over month. Sometimes there's feedback or asks for more. But any modern day executive leadership team or board team with a company is in meetings from the time they wake up till they close the laptop in the evening, and in between all of those is probably 100 emails a day, right? Internal.
Right.
So, there's probably a higher level discussion with Jen, whom you know, right? And things of that nature. I'm kind of just running the analysis and data and getting that over to them. And I think they're still trying to feel feel me out. Like,
Yeah.
who's this guy anyway? But when you equate that to, I'll open that back up. When you equate that to numbers, what I do is highlight clients who are over 10K in fees, right? Projected fees. I highlight that on the report every month, track down reasoning from their primary contact, which is usually our results strategist, for further context, because I have a regrettable churn reason according to them in our CRM, right? But I want to be able to provide anybody over a certain fee limit cap on the ELT. I want them to know details, right? And so I go line by line, and if this is boring, tell me to tell me
No,
to
this is great
stop.
stuff.
No, and then I go in depth, gather intel from the results strategist and highlight that. So, you know, if we're looking at those numbers for December, we had 8 clients that fit that category, ranging anywhere from, fee amounts of 45,000, 28,000, 20,000, 17,000, 29,000, so on and so forth. Well, that's just a small percentage of the clients from December who are over 10K, and add that up. I mean, quick math on that is, $200,000+ in the month of December. And that's just from people who hit a certain, limit. I don't think that they have an extreme reaction to that when they get that report, because a lot of what we're going through is acquisitional churn.
Right.
And they're aware of that, so I don't get any, but we're trying to fine tooth comb this so that we don't not that the process that you're highlighting isn't important, but we have, we're a small team, so the least amount of time that I have to do this problem solving process, there should be enough answers over there that I don't have to walk through, well, what do you think's causing this? What do you think is causing
Right.
this? Here's what's causing it. If there's one that's really nagging at you, then we'll go through this, right?
Yeah.
Mitigation.
Fair point. Sometimes you're coming to the table and you've got the data because you do know what's causing it. But what I really loved about what you just did, Joe, is you just walked through the entire example I wanted to walk through here.
Can that be
So
my case study? Did I just give it to you, or do you want
that's a
that?
really good case study. In fact, I just made a note to send you an email. That might be a good presentation at CXPS. So I think there's really something there. Worth looking at. So what Joe did was he did the work to understand, what does this cost the business? And that, multiplication is your friend. So when regrettable churn happens, what does it tend to cost? Well, what's our average account size that churns? $10,000, $20,000. Okay, you can find that number. And if you don't know the number, get whoever you're talking to give you a ballpark number. And if they say, between 10 and 20,000, pick the smallest number. All right, 10. So when it happens, what does it cost? How often does it happen? Well, now you take the cost times the frequency. So anytime you can use multiplication, the size of the occurrence, the frequency of the occurrence, that's going to help you get some numbers that are going to draw attention. And when numbers draw attention, that can draw action, investment, and change. Another thing that Joe did that was just absolutely brilliant, and I love that you did this, Joe, congratulations, was he broke it down not as an annual number, but as a monthly number. when you say we're losing $2.5 million a year to regrettable churn, okay, that's a big number. I'm going to pay attention to that. But that doesn't necessarily drive urgency. When we say every month that goes by, we're losing $200,000 in churn. And they say, okay, well, it's not in the budget for 2024, but we can carve off some budget for 2025. I'm like, that's 10 more months. That's 10 more months we're going to accept losing $200,000 a month in churn.
I think the biggest bonus for doing it monthly is catching trends to, you know, things that fly under the radar sometimes when we're all busy, and ELT's putting out fires, right? Like you said. So if, you know, I do a synopsis at the end of that report and break it down by results strategist to, you know, look for red flags there. Do we have somebody within the firm who's seeing a higher number or trending in a certain direction, right? And then I do a analysis. And by the way, a lot of this is Jen's baby, so don't, you know, don't have me taking all the credit, but we're just perfecting the process together now that I'm here. But there's a synopsis at the end, you know, where we kind of go into a breakdown of everything, a breakdown by region for regional leaders, a breakdown of I'm not going to get in the weeds on that, but it allows you to look for trends and determine, is this because of the recent acquisition, or do we have other outliers here? If it's accuracy issues, that doesn't have anything to do with us acquiring a firm in Montana, for instance, right?
Right.
That's so.
So that's another excellent point here. This step of the process isn't just to quantify the size of the impact in order to get funding and resources allocated. Okay, got a $2.5 million problem, Joe. Yeah, it's a lot easier to say we're going to give you $250,000 in resources, whether it's internal time for training, whether it's external time for, you know, investing in something, whether it's hiring another CX coordinator to assist you and blah, 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 whatever that investment is, there's a good ROI on that. But also by establishing the metrics, it gives you the KPIs for tracking success. So we're going to allocate some resources to go tackle this regrettable churn problem. But because we're tracking regrettable churn month by month, you know, we can hypothesize, yeah, it's going to take us 6 months to, you know, do enough work to start seeing an impact, but we should start seeing an impact by July. And then we can start trending those numbers. And if the numbers aren't moving, did we invest enough? Did we choose the right solution? Do we need to tweak something?
One of the parameters is due to fees or value perception, which is part of the reason why we brought Megan on as a pricing strategist. And I'm sure that Amanda and Ava both run into this, where you have annual, you know, inflationary or whatever the reason is, increases, right? We every firm does it. I know they do at Markham. Like we have to increase our fees to some degree to afford us acquisition properties and so forth. So that's one of our parameters as well, is and that I think that's key for allowing leadership to hedge whether we went too far with those models, right? You see a trend over, you know, end over end, where it's month over month where that number is spiking in Q1 and Q2. We need to, you know, they need to have a discussion about that at that point. That's a really strong indicator to them that they were too robust there.
Right. So yeah, again, this is the hardest part. Joe, what you did probably sounds a little intimidating for someone who hasn't done that degree of analysis before, but that is the kind of diligence that can be necessary in order to really drive and affect change. And the larger your organization is, the good news is the size of the problem tends to be bigger, the frequency of the problem tends to be larger in scale. So that tends to give you more budget to go work with to solve some of these things. So that leads us into the final step. We've identified the problem, we've root caused it, we've talked through the stakeholders impacted, so we know who to engage in the solution. We've talked about the size of the problem, so we can size the solution appropriately. $2.5 million problem, $250,000, $500,000 investment to solve the problem. That seems reasonable. We can do that. Well, now what does the solution look like? And so as we get to the solutioning step, we're going to build an action vision of the solution. And the solution step needs to specifically tackle the root causes. So if this problem is being caused by these 4 things, we're not solving the problem, we're solving the causes of the problem. So if there's 4 root causes, we need a solutioning statement or a vision statement that's going to tackle each of those 4 root causes. So that's how we build the solutioning framework. An action vision, from my perspective, somebody does something when this happens in order to create a result. And somebody is never we. It's amazing how many times leaders go, well, all we got to do is, or if we did this, then we doesn't do garbage. We is meaningless. So who's we? Does somebody needs to be a name or a role or a title? If our auditors did what? This thing. When do they do it? Well, when this thing happens. And then when they do that, when that happens, what's the result that they can expect? That makes it measurable. So knowing what the problem is, knowing what's causing it, let's create an action vision of a solution that tackles each root cause. And the result is that engages the impacted stakeholders. We know when it's happening, so we can drive accountability. And because we did the impact statement, we can start forecasting results. Here's what the impact of the business is going to be. And now leaders, when they start looking at the solution, they can see it. They can actually imagine this happening in the business. It doesn't become nebulous. One thing that's so hard with driving change around CX is CX to the uninformed. It sounds very touchy-feely. It sounds very like squishy. And that's one of the biggest challenges with CX. It's a lot like marketing. It's a lot of stuff that you don't really see, but if you don't have it, you miss it. Right? So this is what helps make it real and concrete, especially with the very strong type A brains that we're dealing with in professional services. Now, when you get to the end, you're like, hey, have you thought about how you're going to solve this? If they don't give you the ideas, and they're not going to give it to you in a nice tight format, you might have to restate it a few times in order to get there. If they just like throw their hands up and say, I have no idea what the hell I'm going to do. I didn't think it was this big of a problem. And now that you help me understand really the size and scope of the problem, I don't know how to solve it. Again, if you've done your homework, if you did this on an island and you came prepared, you might already have some solution ideas in place. So you can ask a question. Well, do you think it would help if, and then you try on one of these solution statements that you've written. Do you think it would help if our auditors did this when that happened to create this result? Yeah, that might work. Tell me more about what that would look like. And so you're expanding it to where you're offering an idea in a question form. Again, it's unobjectionable. This is about getting buy-in. This is about getting skeptical leaders to start owning the solution themselves. Tell me more about what that would look like. How would you see that happening at Markham or at Pinion or at Client Savvy? And as they start painting it with their paintbrush, it becomes their solution. And now they're excited about it. And if they need to go get, maybe you're just working with the COO, or you're just working with a division leader, and they get excited about it, you've just given them the tools that they can go sell it to the board. You're creating allies and advocates here of a shared solution. One more great tool to use at this step is telling reference stories. So, Joe, you just gave a great story about stuff you're doing with regrettable churn. Amanda, you might go to your leadership team. Hey, let me tell you what Pinion's doing. They're doing this, they're doing this, they're doing this, and here's who's doing what when and the result that they're seeing. Do you think that would work here at Markham? Yeah, something like that could. What?
I need everyone to sign NDAs when we leave
Yeah.
here, Amanda. You can't take that with you.
We are all under NDA, just full disclosure, we're all non-disclosure. It's all part of CXMP. But what parts of what Joe's doing or what part of what Pinion's doing do you think would work here? What would need to be different or adapted to make it work at Markham? And again, now you're coming up with a more articulate vision where they see, this is how it's going to work. So from there, we move into, if I can put together a plan to address this challenge, could we look at it together? Here's where you're now, I need some investment into CX in order to go solve this problem with you. But now that we've understood the problem, what's causing it, impacts, who's impacted, what the solution needs to look like. If I can draw this up as a plan, would you agree to take a look at this? I mean, who says no? Because we've sized it up. It makes sense. Of course, they're going to want to look at it. And now you're kind of building your case for that investment. So we'll wrap up here and then take a quick break. Coming out of the solutioning process, we're going to create the plan, write the story. I've got an example here on the screen. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but I mean, there's no reason why it can't fit on a page. Good executive summary. What's the critical issue? What are the root causes? What's the impact of the business? The combined higher revenue and increased gross margin will result in a bottom line increase of $35 million. Executives are going to open their eyes and see that. What are the solution approach and components? Well, if Alex and the BD team could do this, if the group managers could do that, if the seller doers knew this, if the group managers had that, if Acme leadership knew this. So we've got all of those solution components that are referencing back to the root causes. So it's a page. I mean, tighten it up. We went through a kind of a complex, nuanced process to get there. But if we can communicate it really succinctly and clearly, and maybe there's, pages and pages of supporting documentation, if you've had to go to finance to get, a trend report of regrettable churn over the last 3 years so that you can, talk about your numbers, you can certainly attach your addendums, but tell the story concisely on one page. I forget which one of you said leaders are in meetings all day, and in between meetings, they're doing 100 emails. This is about the attention span you're going to get. They can read a document and make a decision. Right. So from there, we're agreeing to implement. As you go into implementation, those KPIs that you develop, the impacts that you forecast, track them like a hawk. Make sure part of your solution is building the measurement framework to track that. Because when you go through this cycle once, when you show your professionalism that I'm a business analyst who can analyze business and really make an impact to the business using some CX tools, but I'm acting like a business person, not like a CX person here. And when you go through that process and you get buy-in and you start measuring the results, whether the results prove that you were right or not, just the fact that you're tracking and you're accountable. And if it doesn't work, hey, you know what? Do we need to change something or did we just get it wrong? It's okay sometimes to get it wrong and fail. Jeff Bezos famously said, the bigger we grow, the bigger our failures need to be. So leaders are generally okay with failure. Just by tracking, when to cut bait you know when to say it worked, it didn't work. Do we give up? Do we shift gears? Do we try something different? But as you go through and you do that, you start to build CX or the CX function inside the organization as CX is a tool that we can use to make the business better, not just to make clients happy, not just to increase a net promoter score or something like that, but we're really using CX to create and drive business results. So you do this once, it's really easy to get investment in what's next. Maybe not really easy, but it's a whole heck of a lot easier than the first time through. So the more you track the results and report back on them, the easier it is to repeat the process. And before long, you'll have leaders coming to CX saying, hey, I got this problem. Or, hey, I see this potential catastrophe looming. Can you help me on that? And that's ultimately what we want the business doing. We want the business coming to CX all the time saying, here's some things that we're concerned about. CX, come help us solve it. So any questions about the solutioning process? Has anyone seen something like this before? You're nodding your head, Ava. What have you seen before that's similar?
Yeah, we have a client feedback program here, like a formal one, and we do a lot of this, but where it's helpful to me is for internal right now, you
Yep.
know, like getting that buy-in for internal,
Yep.
how to expand the, you know, how, as I said earlier, expanding CX within the organization. So I've seen these concepts, and we, like I said, we do this a more like formal process, but only with like very high key decision makers and stakeholders. But it's helpful to see within my team, within my firm, within other departments, other decision makers,
Yep.
and things like that.
Yeah. Amanda, how about you?
Yeah, going off what Ava said, we also do external interviews and surveys with our clients, but we also do them internally, and Jen has set up a great program and system. So both have been, I think, especially internally, has been really helpful to see where our areas of strengths are, but also I think more importantly, where are areas where we need to improve. So we've learned a lot from doing those internal surveys to see, you know, what we need to work on, whether that's more personalized services, like I said, being transparent about increased rates and unexpected billing overages, stepping more into an advisor role at Markham. A lot of our clients want to see that. So it's been helpful to see the numbers and what can come out of doing the internal surveys and interviews.
Right. Joe, any thoughts from you before we take a quick break and then jump into the exercise?
I think we're good at practicing this. This is more in depth than what we're using, and it's especially to Ryan's point earlier, Sheldon's. You know, keep hammering that question. Like, don't let anybody get away. If you're asked, because we get tasked or pulled into things, you know, once a week, whether it's a, you know, invoicing or whatever situation, but not letting them off the hook. You know, what do you think is causing this? What do you think is causing this? You know, like, but what else could be causing this? And like,
Right.
just keep, you know, I think that it goes back to meeting fatigue. We're always quick to be like, oh, you think what's causing this? Oh, that's it. Okay, great. We're gonna go work on this, and we'll see. We'll come up with answers in a week. You know,
Right.
I like the idea of like, well, what else could it be? What if there's any shred of possibility that it's something else? What else could it be? Right.
Right.
And let's get a full picture. So,
Right. Great stuff. All right, so it is 34 past the hour. Let's come back at a quarter till. And I'm gonna go ahead and drop the mural link into the chat box. So sometime in the next 10, 12 minutes, if you'll jump into the mural, and then we'll start working through the exercise. All right. I did pause the recording just so we didn't have 12 minutes of blank space for anyone who comes back to watch this later. So there's the announcement there. Welcome back. I do see Joe, I see you in here. Amanda, I see you in. Ava, any challenges getting into the mural?
Yeah, mine's just taking a little longer.
All right. Oh, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. There's no need to watch the shared screen. I'm literally just doing the shared screen for the recording purposes. You can certainly stay inside Mural for your own purposes. So what we're going to do is actually go through an exercise here, and I made a couple copies of this. If you wanted to go off and work on this independently, you can. We've got a small enough group. If we all just want to work together in one space, we can. But you see the framework here, creating what is the critical business issue. So we can define one, go through the root cause analysis, and what I would suggest is one root cause per row. And then I would start thinking through who's impacted, how's impacted, the solutioning components. That lets us, make sure, hey, does this root cause, have we thought about the impacts and have we thought about a solution? So it doesn't have to be perfect. Again, we're not going to let perfection get in the way of good enough here. There is a space down at the bottom for the measured by. So as we start thinking through, sometimes measurement stuff comes up like out of sync. So if there's some ideas for measurement, we can drop those ideas down at the bottom. And then as we come up with the solution components, then we can start thinking about how do we really write this solution narrative with measurable ROI. Now, my guess is we're probably not going to get done today, but I did want to at least get through the core of this and let you experiment your way through this, stub your toes a couple times in the learning process, and ultimately come up with some confidence that you are equipped to take this skill and start putting it into practice. I do want to share that over on the left-hand side, I do have a version of the slide deck available for download. That was mountain themes, rock climbing instead of surfing at different conferences. I had different themes. That one was in the mountains. So otherwise, same slide deck. And then I do have a one-page like Word document if you wanted to use a Word document version of this to print out, bring to a meeting instead of Mural. But what's in the Word doc is basically the same thing that we have here in the mural exercise. So those resources are there for you. So let me ask, does someone want to start with there's a couple ways we can do this part of the exercise. If someone wants to practice interviewing someone, hey, I want to run the interview, you can raise your hand and run the interview. If someone wants to have a problem that they see in their business get diagnosed by the team, you can raise your hand and say, hey, I'll be the person interviewed. So yeah, anyone want to volunteer for one of those roles?
Trying to think of an issue to tackle.
And we had that list of 24 problems from earlier. I can certainly suggest one if no one has one that comes to mind, but I would suggest if one of you knows a leader is losing sleep at night over a particular problem, particularly one of those that you might have written down earlier, that could be a good one to throw into the bucket here. And here's the fun part where I sit quietly until someone steps up and volunteers. All right. So does someone specifically want to practice like driving the conversation? You want to be the one to actually ask the questions and drive the conversation. Does someone want to do that part of it?
I can do that.
Okay. If not, I was going to volunteer Tim, but Joe, if you want to drive the conversation, you can drive the conversation. That'll be good.
Tim can help me. I'll no doubt need it.
All right. Tim, you can be a wingman for Joe. You can provide some coaching. Good. So then Ava or Amanda, does one of you have a problem that you want Joe and Tim to diagnose? Knowing that you'll get to slip in and out of being the interviewee and coaching Joe and Tim and what to do to interview you better.
Can this be, Ryan, a problem internally, or are we just looking from problems from the clients?
I'm thinking this is an internal problem in your business, and you're using this approach to now go figure out how to position CX as a solution to an internal business problem. This is not something that, yes, this does work externally with clients. I'm thinking this is internal right now. So Amanda, you're thinking about Markham. What's something going on at Markham that, boy, I think CX should help solve?
I mean, this is kind of a general issue that I've seen while being here and being exposed to CX, is that it's been, I think we've spoken about this, Ryan, that it's been hard to get full, we have support, but it's been hard to get leadership on board fully, whether that's partners, whether that's supervisors, managers, and then having that trickle down to the associate level. So I guess it's about exposure and kind of awareness of our CX program, since we are such a big firm with 49 offices, 40 nationally, one internationally. I guess it's just hard to get everyone on board, which I know is a general problem. That's not really a niche issue, but that's what comes to top of mind.
All right, Joe, Tim, this is yours. I'm just here to help guide and coach.
And Ava, feel free to chime in too if you are seeing similar issues at your firm as well.
So you're having issues with CX buy-in, top down.
Well, I guess my question is, this is a little bit about what this exercise is hoping to solve, right? Like identifying business challenges or problems, and then determining the root cause, the impact, and then how CX can solve that problem. That's how you'll get leadership buy-in for CX. So, and jump in, Ryan, if I'm pushing back wrongly here, but I'd say, like, let's try to identify a core business challenge, because that's your challenge, right?
Yeah.
But the leadership clearly don't see a CX adoption as a business challenge. So you need to try to identify one of those business challenges that leadership will see as a problem, and then we can start to talk through root causes and impact on the business, and then potential CX solutions that will solve that problem. Am I right, Ryan?
Tim, I think you are spot on. I wasn't gonna correct course because I thought it was kind of meta to have this exercise reveal this exercise as a solution to itself. So I was gonna kind of let that roll, but I think you're absolutely right. I think
Well, and I'll just say too, I'm as new to this process as all of you, so it's not like I'm like just waiting to jump in with I'm a noob at this. I'm learning this process to go with this with, you know, our clients and prospects and things like that. So that was my take.
I think that your point's valid, Tim. I mean, it's kind of a mirror within a mirror at that point, like Ryan said. And I've got one that we're kind of working on now, when we can get people's attention. If we want to switch roles and somebody wants to interview me, we're kind of dealing with felt concern from different leaders through areas of the firm. regarding client handoff and debriefing strategies, cross services, cross functions. And a general felt issue with a lack of collaboration and not distrust, but a lack of connection in regard to cross-selling, kind of what you were talking about before, Amanda and Ava, that's an ever-present problem. There's a lack of trust in cross-selling a client that you've been working with for 2 or 3 years into something that's newer or more innovative within the firm, like sustainability consulting. We'll just use that as an example. And so we've had a couple independently leaders within the firm approach us on how to debrief and hand off a client and to initiate that. I don't know if that qualifies here or if we just need to be more basic in our concern. You know, we're churning commodity crop clients, and we're not. But I'm just throwing that out there. If it needs to be more basic, or if it can be that finite.
So, and Ava and Amanda, you can join me in the questioning. If Joe has switched roles and he's now the client. So if I'm hearing correctly, the challenge is there's a lot of churn with clients that you would consider the work to be commoditized work.
No, within our like commodity crops.
Commodity. Oh, okay,
yeah.
sorry.
But then the other one was the lack of cross-department faith in client handoff strategies.
So it's there's a lack of internal faith.
Yeah, it's a real issue. That's something that we've had brought to our attention
By clients.
by internal leadership.
Okay.
In different functions within the firm. And maybe that doesn't fit, or it may be too specific to develop questions around. So I give up. You come up with something.
Can I pause here for a sec? Joe, I think this is a great one to tackle. I think it's well within the scope of what this exercise is meant to do. So let me encourage that. Tim, well done. You listened to Joe. You heard him state a problem. You restated it. He started talking a bit more, adding more clarity. Did you understand the problem better after he said it the second time?
Yes.
Okay. So great work following the process there and then seeing the result of that. So I'm going to jump in and interrupt every now and then to pat people on the back when you do something great, or provide some course correction as needed. We do have this mural here. Does someone want to take a stab at dropping in the sticky notes when something comes up? So like a critical issue here, if you just double click. Ava, looks like you maybe are volunteering. Your mouse is right there. Do you want? Yep, there you go. So you can write down Joe's critical issue. Amanda, I think this is your first CXMP workshop. Have you used Mural before?
No, this is my first time using it.
All right. Well, if you just double click somewhere in the white space, it makes a little virtual sticky note and you can just start typing. And it's just a collaborative way. We can all add notes simultaneously. And if you need to move a sticky note around, you can click on it and drag a sticky note around. So it's just a good tool for us to collaboratively note take and work together. So it looks like Ava, that's you typing?
No, I got stuck. My mural got stuck. For some reason, it's going really, really slow on my
Oh, I'm
end.
sorry to hear that.
I'm
Every now and
trying, but it was the blue circle has just been going. But I do see it now, so I can jump in as we keep going or
yeah. Trying to think
Well, there's two separate issues here, right, Joe? Or are they connected?
Well, and I apologize, Tim, I think I combined two ideas that I was throwing out there and you melded them together. I think that the Post-it note, covers it perfectly. I just didn't know if this idea was too specific or if we needed to be more general and like, you know, we're losing clients under 8K or,
Well,
Yeah, so-
what I'm almost wondering is if the handoff is part of the root cause of the churn, right? Like, or have you already identified that there's churn and the hypothesis internally is that it's because there's not a proper handoff?
Yeah, I think that we've identified the reason for churn, and now this is just a general felt issue from leadership within the firm. In properly having, you know, setting handoff meetings. You have a client, you have a leader of this function within the firm, you have a leader within this function within the firm. There's issues, and it may be impacting churn real world, but we're not having a debriefing strategy where we say, hey, you know, I'm so and so with this tax function of the house. Sitting down with the client and introducing them over to a succession planning, you know, TL. And so what we're getting from leadership at times is that there's not a good way established to do that that's accountable. But also from clients through surveying, on occasion, we get that they feel like between service lines or functions, they're kind of flapping in the wind a little bit, like they've been hung out to dry a little bit. They didn't, and clients that have indicated that they feel like their time's wasted getting to know somebody and have that person get to know them when they had such a good, they just don't understand why their relationship with, let's say, Adam over here, and now they're dealing with Susan over here, and they're having to play catch up on their whole life story. And a lot of that could be done in a debriefing process internally, and then a handoff strategy in person between the three entities: client, function one, function two. That was long-winded, but that's what we're dealing with. So
That's helpful. So, there is no established process internally for really onboarding, I guess the new internal team.
onboarding, yes, we have a, you know, established process for on and offboarding, but this is more relational, right? Relationship focused and say, you know, it's a time saving measure for the client to not have to go. Some of this detail should be provided internally from a function that has some of that data, right? So succession planning needs financials and background and history, and, you know, Adam over here in our tax and A&A side of things knows, you know, that there's some, if you're familiar with succession planning, it's retirement planning, right? Essentially, it's handing over your legacy to the next generation. If Adam over in the tax and A&A side knows that Bill the farmer has had, you know, family squabbles with his two brothers for ownership of the farm. That should be part of the debriefing strategy with Susan, with, next gen succession planning. That should be handed over on a plate, and a lot of that isn't happening. So Bill is having to bring Susan up to speed on every aspect that could pertain to the retirement or succession planning process. And I don't know if I'm explaining that right. I'm trying to come up with examples off the top of my head, so.
No, I think I'm tracking.
And so if I,
go
oh, go
ahead.
ahead. No, I was just gonna say, I mean, if I can throw a cause out there, I personally feel like a lot of this has to do with distancing due to us all, all of us dealing with a largely remote workforce now, kind of people feeling like they're on an island. That's kind of one of the ways that I've been tackling it, and approaching this, in conversations. Another root cause is, I think, and it relates to that, is I think that people they're becoming insular in their train of focus and their objectives for the day, and they don't take the time to really do a full walkthrough or work through of what other functions are doing, what that onboarding process looks like for this function that you never touch and don't have anything to do. If they familiarize themselves with that and then recognized overlap, I think that would cure a lot of this potentially. Yeah.
So Joe, as these notes are coming into the mural, are these lining up with what you're saying?
Yep.
Ava, by the way, is becoming a mural pro. I saw her putting all those sticky notes down.
Hey, Ryan, can you send the mural? I apologies for everyone. I had to drop and come back because I had a client meeting, but I'm not seeing anything on the screen. So
It's in the chat. Look in the Zoom chat, and there's the link for it.
when you join late, there it is.
Yep, I just put it there for you. Great. And so just to
I have a
bring,
quick
go ahead, yeah.
question. So for who's impacted, I think for all of these, like it's always going to be the client, because like if you don't have your process and you're not, you have these gaps, aren't they always going, are they always going to, my question is like, are they always going to be in that like second column? Like, should we just assume that at all times, or at least with this example? Or I'm just trying to, visualize and put it back in my head.
So it's a formal process, but it's
Mhm.
not necessarily like how you fill it in is a little bit more organic.
Okay.
So sometimes you're like, oh yeah, the problem here is that a clients are being impacted because of how we're handing them off between specialties or divisions. So yes, the client's going to be impacted every step of the way.
Yeah, so I guess is it beneficial to keep client in every single row then, or should we think about internally the other people involved, because it's always going to affect the client?
I mean,
I don't-
I think for the remote workforce portion, that's an EX issue, right? Employee experience issues. I would put employees there first. Because if that's how they're feeling, then that's where they live, right?
So yeah, in terms of the who's impacted, you don't necessarily have to do a who for each cause. We need to make sure there's a solution for each cause. So the boxes in the middle are like you can kind of cross some lines. It doesn't really matter. That's, you know, I could probably erase the horizontal lines in those middle two columns and it'd be fine. Because you don't want to necessarily write leadership multiple times, but you know, leadership might be impacted differently because there's no debriefing process. They might be impacted differently because there's gaps in the process. So if there are different impacts, it could be relevant to list them multiple times. So it's a big, it depends. So situationally, you think through, does it make sense to list clients multiple times?
Yeah.
Generally speaking, if you're doing an internal case study or an internal analysis, I want to tend to put clients in the impact because the impact of the client isn't necessarily something you're going to monetize as part of your value justification. But when something very clear comes up where Joe said, clients are telling us they feel left alone and they feel like they're wasting time having to meet new people. If clients are telling us that they are very specifically impacted, I put that in there um, just as a reminder that there are external impacts as well. If a client says they're wasting time, their tolerance to pay more fee probably goes down. Their, you know, likelihood to repurchase probably goes down. So there's some downstream impacts from that.
No, that's helpful. Sorry for being dense. And
Oh, not at all.
for
Uh,
me, everything is like everything funnels to the client, like at all times. So that's why I'm thinking that way.
Well, that's why you're in CX. That's
Right,
absolutely the way to
exactly.
be thinking. And if this feels like a lot, I've taught this as a 4-day course before.
Mm.
So we're trying to cover in 3 hours what can really take 4 days to master. So don't feel dense. You guys are doing a master class in record time. So
Just make one giant sticky note that says clients and paste it next. Column.
so any feedback for Tim? How is his process going through the root cause phase?
I feel bad for, I feel like I really spun Tim around throwing a couple ideas out there, so I apologize again, Tim.
Oh, no worries.
And when you interview a leader about a pain that they see in the business, they're going to do the same thing to you. I think it was Ava saying, what do you do with someone who just like talks and just dumps everything out? And it's like, okay, that's again why there's a process, because you can let someone talk and you can write down what's relevant. This stuff that's not, you can kind of stick off to the side, but then we can always bring them back to the exercise and say, all right, you know, Joe, what I've heard you say is there is a lack of trust in the handoff process between service lines. Is that concisely what I heard you say?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a lack of trust in handoffs between service lines. What's causing that? I heard you say that there's no debriefing process. There's gaps in the process that haven't been identified. The clients are saying they're feeling left out and alone in the handoff. That's not really a cause, maybe. In fact, I might even say that's really is it a cause of the problem, or is it a result of the problem?
Which,
What?
I'm sorry, I missed the first
Client saying they feel left out alone in the handoff. Is that a cause of the problem or is that a result of the problem?
result.
So we might move that one over into the impacts phase. And this is why I like something like Mural, because you can like move stuff. It's easy. Part of what's causing the lack of trust in the handoff is that the specialists don't think about or understand the other specialties. Did I hear you say that accurately?
Part of it, yeah.
So what did I miss?
What's that? I'm sorry.
You said that's part of it. So what part did I miss in capturing what you said?
Um, it has, I think it has, I think it's largely to do with not understanding the other functions process. I think that that's 90% of it. So that's accurate.
Don't understand the other internal processes. What did you
Or
say?
needs even, other functions or departments needs for a client. It kind of comes down, and it also, I think, comes down to people being asked to do more with less and being incredibly busy, especially Amanda knows, like tax season, is we're getting anybody into a meeting right now is tough. So for survival reasons, I think that people go in, you remove the question in your head, what can I do to make this easier? What service can I provide this other internal function to make their life easier? Getting to know this client and what's needed there. So I think that there's duality there. Some of it's not understanding the other team's needs. Some of it's not taking the time to understand how you could be helpful and just out of necessity.
So what just happened, guys? I'm reading back to Joe what he said, and then we just learn a whole lot more. And it gives us more shades. It gives us more layers of understanding.
It worked.
It works every time. So ask the question, what else? What else? Then go back through, read back the notes that you took, and you're going to find more. All right. Someone want to take a stab at interviewing Joe about the who's impacted? Tim, you want to keep going if no one else volunteers?
Sure. Yeah. So we've got leadership, the firm overall. Obviously, most of these impact the clients, the employees. Who else, even more specifically, are impacted by all of these issues?
I mean, I think we could split those off. I mean, that's the core, right? Clients, the firm, leadership, and employees, but we could almost split those off into different reasons. So if the remote workforce and people kind of feeling detached or isolated, and don't see themselves as a greater organism, you could add a different reasoning for people being asked to do more with less. That's another EX conversation that needs to be had within the firm, with burnout, right? Is burnout an offshoot of the employee impact? Trying to read these little guys here. That could be related to the third from the bottom as well. We don't take the time to understand the other functions or needs. So all of these impact the firm in some degree. They don't always impact the client. It depends on the client. It's a subjective thing with clients. So there are probably 80% of our clients that don't mind doing that because they have the time to go through that process in a detailed and oriented fashion, or they're just easier going people in general, and they understand that somebody's trying to provide a service for them, so they're happy to answer questions. I think that the greatest client impact are that demographic that's maybe more easily frustrated, or back to the client or back to the internal post-it or being asked to do more with less, right? Some of that, if you're in the ag world, has to do with the time of year. Is it, harvest situation, right? And they're running a 10,000 acre, giant farm. So timing, I think timing isn't a who, but people's time is impacted. On all three fronts, excluding the origination team. The team that's gaining the new client or service. And anybody and the client's time, but that's, I think, the root cause of the issue is that the handoff team, the team that's been working with the client, it costs them less of their time to go the easy route and maybe just do a quick introduction and dump, and dump and run and move on to their next objective. So time may be moved over into the how, right? And maybe getting ahead of the curve.
Mhm.
And again, some of these are fuzzy lines. So who's impacted? The teams receiving the work. How are they being impacted? They're spending time recovering because of the poor handoff. Now, if we're gonna, again, we don't have to just always work in the column. We can be a little flexible here. The only thing I want to be careful of is that we don't start jumping into solutioning before we've done the other three columns. But as an example, we could take this one. All right. So, Joe, I just heard you say the teams who are receiving the handoff, they're wasting time trying to recover in some way because of the poor handoff. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit more about that. How often are you handing off from one team to another? How often does that happen?
Well, it happens whenever we're achieving a primary business goal, which is lines of service per client, right? That's something that we're really hammering down on this year. So anytime anyone within the firm is effective there and has effectively cross-sold or cross-introduced a service of the firm, then that is happening. I don't know if I have like it's a general question and it's different for everybody. So it's happening when we're hitting the business goals that leadership has right now.
So again, this is where it gets hard, guys. And we've got to push Joe to come up with a number to quantify the size of this problem. So I've started this train of thought. Why does someone else jump in and try to push Joe? And Joe, it's okay to use back of napkin math. I know earlier you answered a question with 6.89%. We don't need precision right now. Ballpark numbers.
Twice a year.
So twice a year per client?
Twice a year, or let's say once a quarter as a team or function leader.
All right. So this is happening 4x per year per function leader.
Yeah.
Okay. I said multiplication is our friend. So what's our next question, guys?
How many function leaders?
How many function leaders do we have?
Mhm.
Let's say, well, no, 52.
So this is telling us it's happening about 200 times a year. It's happening 4 times per year per function leader. There's 52 function leaders, 4 times 52. So Joe, do you feel like this struggling handoff process is happening about 200 times a year?
Yeah, roundabout, sure.
So then what's our next question, guys? And Joe, you can't answer. Joe, you can answer the question. Don't give us the question that you're going to then answer. What's the next question we would ask?
How much does that cost?
So each occurrence, what's the financial impact every time that happens?
Unknown.
So what do you mean by that?
It hasn't been quantified.
So what do you think is happening if you had to use your gut?
Price wise?
Yeah, every time we have one of these frustrating work handoffs, I heard you say that the teams receiving the work have to spend a lot of time recovering because of the poor handoff. So every time we have one of these poor handoffs, you said the team spends time doing extra work.
Mhm.
So if you had to ballpark, how much extra work is the team doing every time they receive one of these poor handoffs?
Yeah, how many hours of extra work each time? Ballpark.
Well, I mean, we're at that point, we're talking billable hours, right?
So it's still, it's billed, all of that extra work is billable?
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, getting to know them on a personal level and their background. That is the one of the major primary CX pitfalls in professional services, in my opinion, is that anytime you're with a service professional, whether it's, you know, an engineering firm or what have you, more often than not, their time is money, and everybody's making money on that time with the client. And so it's a double-edged sword when you have a tax pro coming in to do a state valuation, whatever it is, you know, an audit on your company. They, if they're considerate, they're keeping everything concise and blunt, plus they're accountants, right? So that's not, it's not hard. It's not a difficult territory. But on the flip side, there isn't a lot, because of that, there isn't a lot of room for nicety and kind of warmth and some of like the CX feely stuff. So yeah, we're talking billable hours, and a lot of, I think, people within the tax realm stay away from a lot of that because they want to be conscientious of the client's time and their money and only take what's offered to them. But if we're talking billable hours for just getting, you know, if we're talking about like succession planning, which we kind of use as our case, there's a lot of information there that has to do with very personal and deep things, your family, your relationships, how, you know, your attorney is brought into the conversation, you know, which children are staying with the business. It's really like deep, heavy end of life planning stuff. So, and a lot of that can't be translated over. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud. Let's say it's 10 hours per average. That's an extra 10 hours spent with the client.
But that's all billable time. So the client's effectively paying for the handover, the handoff?
Yeah, I mean, it's where you get into the nitty gritty of it. Like, what part of it could have been, you know, debriefed from one function to another without the
Right.
client being there?
Do you get pushback or comments from the client where they recognize that they're having to pay for the handoff?
We haven't had anything like that formally in a survey or conversation, anything like that. And again, it comes down to the client. Some clients want to get to know you because they want to trust you, right? Especially ag clients. You're coming in and prying open their family and their business with a flashlight and a crowbar. So you're really prying in there. Some clients want to just give you, here's the documents from last year, here's the documents from this year. Let me know what you need. Email me, right? So if somebody's spending $80,000 on a succession plan for their farm, and that's a lot of money, we haven't had any feedback specifically on that though. No.
So let me pause here because so far what we've gotten is the poor handoff from one function of the business to another is adding about 2,000 billable hours a year. That does not sound like it's a negative to the business. So sometimes we end up coming in here and we reach a dead end. And you got to know when to tap out and say, all right, we're not going to find any gold over here. Sometimes we just need to keep pushing in order to find where that nugget of gold is. What was important for today's purposes wasn't that we find a nugget of gold for Joe, but that we demonstrated how you go down that inquisitive path of probing. So because we were talking through some root causes, we were able to then talk about, our people don't understand the other internal functions, needs, or processes. So that means the teams receiving work have to spend time recovering because of the poor handoff. Well, that led us into a line of questioning to start asking about how much, how frequently, what is it, what's the impact? And we were able to get to a number. In this case, it actually looks like you're profiting because of your poor internal handoff process. So, maybe we just did a poor job of getting to a number, or maybe there's just not a piece of gold at the end of that. But you guys saw the process of how we would go through that. So Amanda, any questions about how you would like start probing and asking that question over and over again to try to build out the case?
Meaning like the next step for the solution component?
Meaning, now that I just kind of guided this one down here with one train of thought to try to get to a quantifiable number, I'm trying to get to where we get Joe to say, here's what this is costing our business. Here's the size of the problem. We weren't successful. I could keep pushing. I feel confident I could get Joe there, but I've done enough of the process. I wanted to turn it over to someone else to try a different approach where we take, some other stakeholder, whether it's leadership, whether it's employee burnout, that could be a line. All right. So, Joe, talk to us about employee burnout. What's the impact of that? So I don't know if Amanda, you want to pick that up and try to come to a quantifiable number. Tim, Sheldon, if one of you wants to pick that up and try to come to a quantifiable number. But that's the purpose of this exercise is we found a cause, we found a who, now we got to get to a how much before we can move into a solution step. Does that make sense? So Amanda, do you want to start it off, and Sheldon and Tim, you can jump in and tag team with her to maybe try to quantify the cost of employees burning out?
Yeah, I can try to kick it off.
All right.
I guess, Joe, so employee burnout. So I guess just basic question is, how are your employees really impacted by that?
Well, I think it creates apathy, right? Apathy is not productive. It's disengaging. So, from a baseline business standpoint, it's bad for business.
What's your employee turnover rate?
Annually, 7%.
And how much does it cost every time an employee turns over and to hire a new employee?
And I am not a human resources professional, so these numbers, if they sound wrong to anybody,
Ryan,
that's
what's
why.
the average? It's like 100,000.
Yeah, let's say, yeah, 90,000.
How many employees do you guys have?
873.
So 873 times 7% is about 60. Let's even just say 50 employees a year times 90K. 4.5 million in turnover to hire new employees every year. Obviously not all of that is because of this issue, but even if 10% of that is 450 grand. Is that kind of what you're getting
Feedback
at,
for
Sedan?
Sheldon. What feedback do you guys have for Sheldon there?
I mean, I like that line of questioning, and we discussed earlier how this initial critical issue could split off into 3 different paths to go down for the CX team, right? You have the kicker of addressing burnout. That doesn't that's kind of something that came about in the conversation, but doesn't really it's a part of the churn and the handoff process, but it's kind of like a secondary project along with the remote workforce and how people feel about that. I feel like that's another pathway. So I like that this is now compounding impact on the firm. We're looking at turnover rate, financial impact. With more questioning, we could probably figure out, billable hour, like Tim was discussing, billable hour impact on the client. So it's good. Good job, man.
I think it also then starts getting you some money for EX too.
So the only criticism I would have, Sheldon, of what you did, I think you were a little assumptive at the end, telling Joe.
Maybe it's 10% or whatever.
Right. So in that moment, Joe's got the opportunity to say, no, it's not that at all. You may have really undershot. You may have really overshot and created a possible objection.
So asking more like, how much do you think of that 4.5
Don't
million?
lead. It's kind of like in court cases on, when you watch the lawyers on TV, the judge will say leading, like where you ask the question, but you're also giving them the answer at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? Is that what you're talking about, Ryan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have done it a little bit differently. Sheldon, you went exactly where I would have gone. So a kudos for that. I would have done a little bit more. Boy, okay, so employees burning out, this thing, it creates apathy that's non-productive. So there was a train of thought. Does apathy mean they're spending some time twiddling their thumbs? You can kind of go down, lost hours. Okay, they're logging 10 hours a day during busy season, but they're spending an hour a day, like not being highly effective because they're apathetic. We can quantify that. But then, all right, if they're feeling non-productive, is that leading to turnover where they feel like they're not really doing their best work? So what is your turnover? Great question. What percentage of that turnover might be ascribed to this? Because it's not all just because of this, but that's where he might say 10%. And then, okay, let's talk about the cost of employee turnover. So just going through a little bit, if you get to the big number, 4.5 million, and then you say what percentage is ascribed to that, they might really under aim because they've been kind of startled by the big number.
Yeah.
So before getting to the big number, try to do all your carve offs first. That way, when you do get to the big number, they've already thought through all the exceptions, they've done all the carve offs. And now you still get to, boy, it's a $500,000 problem. They're not now in the mode of trying to diminish it because it feels fake.
Okay, that makes sense. And like, if you were doing this, Ryan, would you then, or would that be opposite actually of staying on task? Like, this is also obviously an employee experience problem that we need to discuss, once we figure all of this out. Because if we can, if your turnover rate's 7%, if we could cut that down to 4%, those kind of things. Is that trying to do too much all in one?
Getting to the solution of it is too much all at one, but all the time I'll be having this kind of conversation with someone and I'm hearing new problems that I'm putting back at the top of the page to does it make sense to come back and do this exercise again with different problems? By the time I get to the end of one of these conversations, I'll have 4 or 5 new problems that we haven't even diagnosed yet, but I heard them along the journey. And so again, as you're trying to build your business case for change, sometimes there's one problem, there's one compelling root cause, it's really killing this person, and it happens 100 times a day, and you walk away, and in 20 minutes you found $12 million a year in lost margin, and you don't have to go anywhere else. I mean, you found the gold in that first pan. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes you go through the exercise and you found $40,000, and the CX thing you want to do is going to take $250,000 investment. And so that means we got to go back. And whether it's digging deeper in impacts on this problem, whether it's, okay, great, we found $40,000 here. Let's go tackle that next problem that I heard you say. Can we tackle that one? And you can work your way through. So sometimes you know what you want to do in the organization, you know what the budget's going to be, you know what resources you need, you kind of got your number, and you're working as the professional, you already know the solution, you're just trying to build the business case for it. And so you keep going in this until the business case makes sense. Sometimes you don't know what the solution is, and so you're doing this really just consultatively, you're exploring, is this even worth solving? Does that make sense?
It's also another, this case right here is a classic example of what I feel like we run into all the time, where it splits off into 5 rabbit holes for you
Yep.
to chase. And when you're a team of 2, that's,
Yep,
it gets back to prioritization, right?
And
absolutely
then
right.
this is where you decide if this is more important, focus on this, or we put it on our backlog for
We'll come back
next
to it
week.
2 months from now. Yeah.
Okay.
Or maybe one of the rabbit holes is where you go from here, and you approach that leader with the original critical issue and say, we've uncovered this thing. And if you don't mind, I would like to look into this and get back with you and see if we uncover more related to the issue, but something more severe.
Yeah. And this is a common spot to break the first conversation, because as you start asking about impacts, you realize we need to go do some research. How often does it happen? How much is each occurrence? I mean, we can spitball and try to keep forcing the process forward, or we can agree this is a worthwhile endeavor to keep exploring. We now know what numbers to go collect. Let's get together next week after I've done that, or after you've done that, and we can put the math together and then finish the process. So this doesn't have to be done in one swoop. It can take a couple hours to really get through one of these.
I'm not leaving here until you guys come up with some solutions for me to use at my
Well, great segue in the final 15 minutes. Let's just, for the sake of exercise, lack of trust and handing off work to different functions. One of the causes of that is that we've got a remote workforce that are on an island who doesn't always understand the other functions, needs, and processes. That's leading to employees burning out, which creates apathy, which is non-productive. Our turnover is 7%. We think we might be able to drop that from 7 to 6% by solving this issue. And that's going to accrue, I think you said $450,000 a year, Sheldon, somewhere in there. So let's just assume that that story holds up. So we have a 400K per year problem, which is really what, like every month we don't solve it is $36,000.
Something like that.
Again, create some urgency. So every month, Joe, that you don't solve this, you're losing $36,000. And it's okay to use some emotion here. Wow. Ouch. Help the leader feel the pain of living with the current state, because what we're doing is trying to convince them to change. So now, does anyone remember?
That's job security.
Yeah, right. So does anyone remember the next question? When we get to solutioning, what do we ask here? So we've identified the problem. We know what's causing it. We know who's impacted. We know what it's costing. What's next?
I want to do that action thing, but I know it's not that.
It is the action thing. Joe, what are you going to do about this?
I don't know.
And you're going to get that answer a lot. So Joe doesn't know. So if anyone has an idea of what Joe could do, here's where we have to engineer it to where Joe feels like it's his idea. And
Do you want me to be ambiguous, or do you want me to tell you what we've started doing?
For this exercise, let's not, 'cause we only have 10, 12 minutes left. I don't want to hear what you actually are already doing, although I'm glad you're working on something. But does someone have any ideas of what Joe could do? How could we use client experience to better or to solve this problem? How could Joe use one of the tools of CX to better solve this problem?
I mean, I don't want to be the client savvy feedback guy, but using feedback from your employees to see if they're working.
Stop. You just told Joe what he needs to do. You went Dr. Phil on him. Try it again in the inquisitive.
Do you think that if you used employee feedback to know if your employees are happy working with the clients that they're working with, that will help with employee burnout? To get the use the employee feedback, and if they're not in the right working with the right client, something like that, get them working with the right client so that they can lower employee burnout. Do you think that would be something that would work?
Yeah, we could do an employee survey and see what people think. We could try it.
And what does that look like?
Go.
Well, why don't you guys write up a survey and distribute it to the firm? Let me know what everyone's saying.
So Joe, do you have
I still struggle with the what does that look like? Tell me more. Like it feels uncomfortable sometimes.
and I think it felt uncomfortable because you don't have a clear picture of it in your head. I think, did it feel like you were spitballing or
Yes. Yeah.
trying to take a wild ass shot to solve the problem without having a clear vision?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So that's why Joe was like, yeah, sure, I guess that'll work. And when you ask what would that look like, he was like, you tell me. So that's where this idea of an action vision is so critical. You have to see it in your head in order to communicate it clearly to Joe. So that framework, if who, could what, when, then this root cause is solved by this capability as measured by a metric. These are the components of a solution. So Joe, just as an example, I heard you say that this problem of the handoff is really because your employees don't understand what the other functional needs or processes are in the other units and service lines in the business. And that's compounded by them being largely a remote workforce working on an island. So that's leading to the burnout, the apathy, and that's contributing to employee turnover. So I heard you say that. So would it help if the employees handing off the work downstream had a clear map of what that handoff process looked like and what the work uptake looked like from the receiving party?
Yeah, I think we need a standard.
So, Joe, you responded more positively to me than you did with Sheldon there, but I want to hear your objective feedback. Are you starting to think about something a little bit differently now?
I think that we need a uniform standard and a box checked for this process to prevent this from occurring going forward.
So you said we there. Who's the we in this story?
The firm-wide.
So, you know, organizations don't do anything. People do something. I'm going to push you here. So if we're talking about a standard, if we're talking about a checkbox, really, who's creating the standard? Who's following the standard? Who's checking the checkbox? Let's get really clear with this picture.
Which level of leadership am I? Executive. All right, so I think that the CX team needs to work with middle leadership throughout the firm to define what a strategy looks like, and it needs to be implemented firm-wide to a uniform standard, and then we'll revisit this in 2 quarters.
And would it help if there was some measurement when these handoffs are happening to assure that the people handing off the work downstream knew the client was happy with the handoff process?
Yeah, we could implement off, a project completion conversation, not an off word, but just
I'm going to
end a project, even just verbal survey. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think that there would be some sort of survey or feedback process to determine efficacy.
So I was trying to get Joe there. What does Client Savvy sell? We sell survey software. I mean, at the crudest level. So I had an objective there. I was trying to build some demand for that. So you start pushing, you ask questions, let the client lead, but you can also lead the witness by asking some of those leading questions. And then Joe gets to the point where it's like, yeah, thinking about it, we probably need to make sure the client is satisfied with the handoff process. Different ways we could have done that. I could have taken an approach, and I started that way. Maybe we need to journey map the handoff process. It's an internal journey map, but let's journey map the handoff process. There's a CX tool that we could deploy. So now how do I get Joe to, think about or invent? We need to map this process in some way so the handoff can be as effective and smooth as possible. But by asking it in the inquisitive, Joe's not objecting to anything. He's not saying no, he's not shutting down. It's actually getting him to, maybe that would work. It's getting him to start thinking through, and now he's buying into to some of those ideas. And Joe may be sitting there saying, no way, I didn't buy into any of that. And if so, Joe share the feedback. But that approach generally is going to be more effective than telling someone what they need to do. So as we wrap this up, again, really the focus here is when you're creating a business case for client experience internally, this is a process you're doing inside your four walls. You're clearly articulating a business problem. That business problem likely has to be coming from or something that a leader or leadership in general is aware of and acknowledges this is a pain point. So you want to go do something with CX, you want more funding, you want a platform, you want 2 other colleagues, you want, to implement journey mapping, you want to do this, you want to twist that, you need a data scientist to, whatever it is you're wanting to pull into CX in order to move you forward because you're a passionate CX professional. Start by articulating the business problem or problems that are going to resonate with the people allocating the resources. Identify, here's what's causing them. Again, you can do this on an island and just write it up as a summary. You can do this in an interview process like we did today, talking to the impacted stakeholders. Go through who are the stakeholders that will be impacted, because that's going to be our change management plan, our communication strategy to include them. We go through the quantification. We found $450,000. That means it's big enough we can put some time and effort into it. And then we start building that really clear, articulated solution. If this person could do this, win that, to achieve this outcome as measured by, you've got a really good foundation of a business case. And that's what's going to let you start making change happen. Any questions or thoughts about the whole methodology and process?
And I don't want to, this probably would take longer than 3 minutes. What if you get through all of that and you still get a no?
Diagnose the process. Reflect back on the process you followed. And did I tell? Did I have 3 problems conflated as one? Did I get to a measurable, quantifiable ROI that all parties agreed to? If you get to a no, you probably missed something along the process. It's not going to be 100%. Sometimes you just have irrational leaders that, even if you make the most rational, logical case, they're not going to buy in. And, sometimes you just take your lumps, right? You could find $10 million. And boy, if we had $1 million, we could go get that $10 million. And if we just had like the worst year of the last decade and we're borrowing money from the bank and we're bleeding dry, I don't have $1 million to go find that 10. We're already too leveraged. I can't even borrow the money because we're too leveraged. Sometimes there's external factors that are going to lead you to a no. First, I would diagnose the process, make sure we followed the process. And then if we found the process was flawless, seek to understand where the no is coming from. Because guess what? Wherever the no is coming from, that's an even bigger, more important problem.
Yeah.
Put that problem in the top and work your way through that one. All right. Any other questions on this?
No, really helpful.
This is good.
Amanda, how about you? This was your first session. How
I
did this
mean, I
meet-
have all my notes here. So I know I was listening a bunch, but it was really informative. And thanks for your participation, Joe and Tim and Ryan. But great to learn. I learned a lot today.
Great.
So thank you.
Well, thanks everyone. I appreciate it. I know we're at the end of the hour, so I won't keep you any longer, but I do appreciate the time and attention. I hope this laboratory of experimentation was helpful. And Amanda, some of the other sessions we do are like, oh, okay, here's how to actually do a journey map. Sometimes we're talking strategy, sometimes we're talking tactics, and lots of things in between. So this was definitely one of the strategic sessions, even though there were a lot of tactics in it. So I do hope you found it helpful. I hope to see you again, and we'll catch you guys all next time.
Tim,
Thank you
go
so
Chiefs,
much.
buddy. See ya.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.